Sure. Thanks, Beth. So, as Beth said, I'm Brandon Huffman. I'm an attorney in Raleigh. My practice focuses mostly on digital media and video games and clients in that space, both corporate and intellectual property matters and licensing and that sort of thing. So, I deal with NFTs kind of from a very different angle than most of the panel is going to talk about today. But I think to start, I'll go in the order of my screen and I'll have you each introduce yourselves and sort of what your connection to NFTs is, and then we'll progress from there. So, Paul, do you want to start?
Yeah, hi. My name is Paul Friedrich, and I'm a cartoonist and a painter and a writer, and started getting into NFTs last year.
All right, Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Sharp. Am I on? Yeah, okay. And I am the content director at Leland Little Auctions, which means that I'm in charge of our social media, our featured stories, as well as like any other ancillary marketing stuff. And we got interested in the NFTs when they just started being unavoidable in the art news and seemed like as part of the art industry, it was something we should explore and be aware of and be up to date with. And so, as the person who writes content, I sort of became the one to do all the research and figure out what they are.
All right, Scott.
Hey everybody, I'm Scot Wingo. I am a local entrepreneur in the Research Triangle Park area. I have an engineering background, so have been in the high-tech industry for a while. So I understand that part of the crypto world. And then I'm also a big art fan. I collect comic book art. And then I'm also pretty much Paul's biggest fan. I don't know who else has proclaimed that, but I'll hold the mantle until someone else tries to knock me down.
Sounds good. All right, Beth, do you want to put up the slides? You know, we had people make slides, so we should use them, right? So the first sort of overarching question that we're going to have, so just to actually let me back up and give a little bit of structure to what we're going to do today. So what we're going to do is go through a little bit of like structured speaking and talking at you, and then we're going to shift to Q&A. And so feel free to ask questions at any point if you have the questions, and if we don't answer it before the Q&A period, Beth or I will make sure that we do answer it then, unless it's totally off topic or vulgar or something, and then we'll skip it. But otherwise, we'll make sure we answer it then. We will save most of the time for Q&A. I think that's the goal anyway, because we find that participants get the most value out of these when they get their specific questions answered. So with that, we'll start with the first sort of high-level question that we assume someone will ask at some point, and I'll throw this to Elizabeth, but the question is, what is an NFT? And there should be a slide. All it says is Beth Bjork says, sharing your screen. Beth, you will figure out the slide while Elizabeth starts talking about what is an NFT.
Sure. A broad question, obviously. And I, for everyone listening, sort of nominated myself to answer this one because I came to it from a place of complete naivete and not knowing anything about it. And so for me, the process of understanding NFT was like every time there was something that explained it and I didn't understand what was in the explanation, I Googled again and figured out. So I was hoping that by me explaining it, I could roll it back a bit for people who have no experience with them. So basically, the basic thing that was a surprise to me when I started researching NFTs is that the NFT is not the piece of artwork or the piece of media itself. It's the digital token that's attached to the artwork or the media that describes the ownership. It's called the metadata, or the data that describes the data, which is the piece of media that certifies when and who made it and who owns it. And so the reason that those are related to cryptocurrency is that they are made on a blockchain in the same way that like Bitcoin or Ethereum or something like that is. And so then that was one of those moments where I had to roll it back and be like, okay, we hear about blockchain and cryptocurrency and all that in the news all the time, but for someone like me who writes content about art, you know, it was one of those words that I would hear all the time, be like, yeah, blockchain. And I was like, well, why is it secure? How does that actually work? And to boil it down and not to go too in depth, and please ask questions or someone else fill in if I'm misexplaining, but basically the reason it's so secure is that many different computers are doing the calculations that secure and certify every transaction on a blockchain. So each time an NFT, which is a little digital file that says so-and-so made this and it belongs to so-and-so, is made, it's certified sort of like by an entire population of computers for the most part. That's the way the majority of models work right now, and that's called the proof of work model. There's also another blockchain model called proof of stake, which some people are, which only requires one computer to certify or mint the NFT, and so some people are trying to move to that model because, as you may have heard, there's a lot of uproar about how much energy consumption NFTs use. And when you have one computer doing the computing work versus many computers, it takes less. So there were a lot of words that I threw out there that are all the things that I had to back up and Google again and again. So if there are questions, let me know. But I think the main essence is the understanding that it's basically a digital file that supports the certification of ownership of mostly a digital asset. There's some noise about people using them to certify the ownership of things that are physical in the real world, but that presents other challenges. I think there were some other parts in this. Did the slide?
Yeah, so I'll just jump to the next slide if that.
Yeah, and I apologize. They worked 10 minutes ago just fine. So I don't know what's going on.
If you want to, Beth, I think Scott has offered that
Yeah,
you give him the permission.
Yeah, I don't have permission. There's a little arrow next to share screen. You click that and then give me permissions.
Let's see, I can pull them up too.
Okay.
Well, so the next slide is you mentioned that it's a digital token that is highly secure. I think the next question, yes, we can. The next question that sort of that raises is, it's stored in the blockchain, right? So what is the blockchain? How does that work?
Right. So the blockchain is each block in a blockchain is a grouping of transactions that have been certified by this group of computers as being legitimate. So rather than say a government certifying that it's legitimate, this is why it's like non-centralized, which is why people like cryptocurrency, is that there's this group of computers that anybody who has access to a computer essentially can run the software for a blockchain and be part of that blockchain. And so each block on that blockchain is a group of these transactions, and these transactions get clumped into a block. It gets added to the chain of files essentially and exists forever, and anybody, because it's decentralized and public, anybody can go in and check it and make sure that it is what they say it is, that those transactions are what the blockchain is saying that they are. And so that's where I was talking about the proof of work versus the proof of stake. And the proof of work is how the transaction happens, and then it goes to this group of computers all competing to finish this group of mathematical equations as fast as possible, and whichever computer finishes the fastest gets credit for certifying that transaction, and that's called mining. Whereas with proof of stake, the software assigns one sort of stakeholder in that group of computers to certify the transaction, and so that's why it's called minting, as opposed to mining. So it's essentially just the difference between a group of computers, and then in the proof of stake, a group of computers certifies that the one computer did it right. But it takes less energy than the one where all the computers are competing to do it as fast as possible. I don't think I made that very clear, so please ask questions.
I think there will almost certainly be questions about all of this, and that's totally fine. We're giving the high level overview. We will expect people to have questions about the specifics, even if the question is, what was that, right?
Right.
So I think the next big question, you mentioned that, it's this metadata that is the NFT. So if I, as an artist or as a consumer, like if I want to participate in this marketplace, if I'm an artist who wants to make an NFT, what am I making? I've already made the art, right? What do I make then? Where does it live? What does it look like? How do I,
Right.
what do I
So
sell?
what you're selling then is the certification that you made that artwork and when you made it, and then you're selling it to someone else. So essentially what you do as an artist is you upload your digital asset, your piece of like digital art or a picture of your physical art or whatever it is, or let's say you're, an athlete, this the NCAA is going to let college athletes sell their likenesses, right? So it could be a college athlete uploading a picture of themselves. And what they are selling then is you put that on one of these there are things called NFT marketplaces. There are bajillions of them. Some of the major ones are Wearable, OpenC, Nifty Gateway, and on those platforms, you then mint an NFT to attach to your digital asset, and that digital token is what you are actually selling.
So you're not selling the copyright or the like if you physically painted something you then took a picture of, you're not selling the physical painting.
That's right. You're not selling the physical painting, and not only are you not selling the physical painting, you're not even really selling the digital. I mean, you are selling a digital file of the painting, but that file is still copyable by anybody on the internet, but they can't certify that they own it. So while you can copy it all over the place, you can't profit from it in the same way as you can profit from selling the original, because you don't have the token that certifies that you have the original digital file. So I'm not sure if I put this on the next slide or not, but there's the metaphor that I like to use is the Mona Lisa. So like the original Mona Lisa is obviously vastly more valuable than a postcard of the Mona Lisa, or even a copy of the Mona Lisa that somebody else painted that looks exactly like the original Mona Lisa. But because Leonardo da Vinci painted the original Mona Lisa and there's only one of them, it's worth so much more, even though you can see it in many, many, many other ways. So just the fact that people, I think, get stuck on the fact that the digital assets are still copyable, but so is a lot of other stuff, and we just have assigned the original value. And so this is basically a way to assign a value to an original digital file and to identify an original digital file.
So we do have a comment here from Jeanette, and I do want to, I will bring this up because I think I sort of baited it a little bit, but so the lawyer in me has to respond to say, so what the comment is, if an athlete uploads a picture of themselves, the copyright belongs to the photographer, unless you're talking about taking a selfie, which is accurate. So the
right,
the artist, in this case the photographer, owns the copyright by virtue of their creation of that thing. So that is correct. So you would, by creating an NFT from something someone else created, you would likely be committing copyright infringement. So don't do that, right? But we'll come back to that.
But an alternative example is the NBA has video that they've paid for and they own the copyright, and they decide to put it in an NFT and sell it to someone and transfer the copyright to them. Now the buyer owns that little video clip.
Right, and depending on the contract, may or may not get, well, in the NBA case does get the copyright, I believe, but in other cases may not, depending on the contract. So it's important to know what's being sold and what's being bought there. But so I think we'll go to the next slide, and I think we're gonna hear a little bit from Paul and Scott about some different marketplaces and maybe how to get started.
Yeah. So what Paul and I are going to do is talk about these from kind of two sides of the coin. He's going to start with the art side, the artist side, the creator side, and then I'll talk about the collector side. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, OpenC is one of the original, if not the original, NFT site, and it's pretty much the most basic site. Anybody can upload art, anybody can buy art. But because anyone can upload to this site without jury or any kind of editing, the quality can vary from amateur to extremely professional.
Yeah. And then on the buying side, it's frustrating because, as the name implies, it's this sea of NFTs, and it's very hard to separate the noise from the signal, or the quality, the wheat and the chaff, or the the quality and the low quality stuff. So a lot of times on there you'll have just really weird stuff like stick figures and things. So it's totally uncurated, but it is kind of fun to poke around and see what's going on in there, and it's a vast sea of NFTs to start out with.
So let's pause here for just a second and make sure. So Scott, I want to hear from both of you maybe a little bit before we go into the next marketplace, a little bit about, Scott, you collect these, right? So I'd love to hear more about why and how you got started buying NFTs. And then on the flip side of that coin, Paul, I'd love to hear how you got started, how you found out about this as a market, not necessarily OpenC, but the NFT market in general, and how you initially went about getting started selling your NFTs.
Yeah, I think my gateway was I've seen a fair amount of digital art be created, and then physical art's easy to get your head around. You just go to a gallery like Elizabeth operates, you see it, and you trust a curator to have put that together and stand by the provenance of the art. But increasingly, more and more art is digital, and I've never collected that because it's really hard to know where did it come from and are there a million copies around. So when NFTs came on the scene, a couple artists I follow kind of in the vein of, I don't know, Paul, if you would call it like street art or pop art, like Banksy and Claus and some of these folks. A famous one in that category named Bipple, he started to put some stuff out. I'm not a fan of that, but I was watching it and started to learn about the NFTs. And two things I like as a buyer about the NFT is, the simple non-technical version is you can actually look in there, and there's this little ability to look into the electronic contract and see the life of it. So you can say, all right, the artist created it on this date, and then it was sold for this much to this person and this much to this person. So it creates a digital record of the history of the piece. The second thing I like about it as a collector is most of the way these contracts are written, the artist gets a revenue share as the art changes hands. So, let's say Paul sells an artwork to me for $1,000, a physical painting to me for $1,000, and then I go sell it for $1 million. In the physical world, he gets no benefit of the increase in value of his artwork. In the digital world, it can be set such that he gets 10% of the transaction every time the art moves, even if it goes up or down. So every transaction, every time the art sells, he gets a revenue stream for that. So as someone that, one of the reasons I collect art is to support the artist. And I like that aspect of NFTs and how it always pays back the artist for what they've created as the art may appreciate in value.
So you mentioned the digital sort of roadmap of the history in the traditional art world. You might call that provenance, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's like a digital provenance, which is very cool.
Yeah.
Paul, just on the so I guess I'm curious, how did you, when you wanted to get started, what were the literal steps you took, right?
For me, for one, NFTs have been around for about 3 years now. I first learned about it last winter, thanks to a conversation with Scott. Took about a week to get my head around the concept of owning something or selling something that isn't real or is digital. But once I figured that out, one way of looking at it is like there's generations now that have grown up not owning DVDs, not owning physical books or albums. Everything is digital, so why not art? And then it begins to make a lot more sense that way. And I love the concept because as an artist, as many artists just have thousands of digital files that have been used once or twice, but are just sitting inside a computer. So this is a great opportunity to put a JPEG or PNG or something or a movie onto a site and let somebody buy it.
Cool. So I know I derailed you a little bit there. I'll let you get back into the rhythm of talking about the different markets. Sorry about that.
Sure.
Yeah, and as a buyer, the other thing that's interesting is there's a variety of these marketplaces, right? So I don't have to, the discovery part is kind of solved. And these are kind of like in the physical world, these are like eBay, Amazon, are marketplaces. So a place for buyers and sellers to come together.
So the next site is Wearable. So this is a slight step up from OpenC. It's still open, but you have some famous names, the Wu-Tang Clan, Mark Cuban, and some Taco Bell have been on this site selling their work. So you can go from stick figures to some real collectible stuff here.
Yeah, and this is a good idea to talk about collections. So one of the first collections was called Crypto Kitties. And, you know, almost like trading cards, someone put together a set of little cat kind of, you know, animated cats that you could buy on an NFT, and then they became very popular to trade. Since then, collections have gotten more refined. Some of them are even, I forget what the word is, they're programmatic, where, you know, a computer generates all these different variations. So you may have seen probably one of the more popular ones is called CryptoPunks, or is it Cyberpunks? I think it's CryptoPunks. A lot of people change their avatars to them on Twitter, and they're, you know, they have programmatic kind of different avatars that have done, and some of them are quite rare. One of them, this guy Gary V just bought one for like $2 million. You know, so you know, these collections are interesting, and then a lot of the collections, they kind of live at some of these different marketplaces. So Wearable is a step up from OpenC for me as a collector, because I can look at the curated side of things and kind of see what's going on there. Also, it has an interesting thing where they list all the top sellers. So I'm on Wearable.com right now, and a big thing is these kind of bored monkey, I think it's called Bored Ape or something like that. So there's like a collection on that's like the number one. So it's interesting to watch trends on these sites. Some of them aggregate up some data, so it's kind of interesting to see the different trends of what artists are trending and what collections are growing.
This site, PickatNFT, is gaining in popularity, especially with artists. One, the NFTs are more reasonably priced, as you can see, between $5 and $50. You can sell them as individuals or as limited editions. And this site also uses Tezos instead of Ethereum or Cash, which is not as problematic as mining Ethereum.
Can I jump in and say one thing that was I didn't understand when I was first discovering NFTs, and that felt like sort of a roadblock for a more accessible marketplace for NFTs, is that there are some sites that accept like a credit card rather than cryptocurrency. There are some sites that you have to use cryptocurrency, but you know, for an artist who's worried that, you know, trying to sell their art, they're going to be limited only to people who are versed in cryptocurrency. There are places, like for instance, I, as part of my research, went and bought an NFT on Nifty Gateway, and we paid for it with a credit card. And actually, I just listed it for sale yesterday just to see what would happen. And you can connect a regular bank account to sell it as well. So you don't have to deal only in cryptocurrency to buy and sell NFTs.
Yeah, and then you know, on this site, I haven't spent much time on it, but there is a big topic, and I don't think we want to go into the whole thing, but you may have read articles that some of the cryptocurrencies are not green energy. So there's a concern over, you know, what's the environmental impact of these things. So it sounds like that's the focus of this, is it's using a underlying cryptocurrency. Most of these are based on a crypto called Ethereum. They're not based on the Bitcoin protocol, because Bitcoin doesn't have that contract where you can see that is sold over time, and the ability to say, whenever this sells, give 10% back to the artist. So that's why they use this thing called Ethereum. And many of them, so there's always new generations of cryptos as we learn, and this Tezos is a kind of a green cryptocurrency, if you will, underlying aspect.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in again because I realized I left out maybe one of the most important things as you were describing that about what is an NFT. NFT stands for non-fungible token, which means that it is non-interchangeable, whereas like a piece of cryptocurrency, like a dollar bill, like a Bitcoin, like one Bitcoin or one Ether is interchangeable with any other piece of that cryptocurrency. This is a piece of data on the blockchain that is not interchangeable with other pieces of NFT data on the blockchain. So it's one unique token rather than something that can be exchanged for another one interchangeably. And that's how it differs from cryptocurrency. That's all.
This is a new one, Zora. This one, and there's a few others. There's Vive and Sing that have just come along. They're focusing on music and video, and in some ways, this is a good way to do a copyright, to get an instantaneous copyright because it's on the blockchain and you have proof.
So I just want to jump in and make one legal clarification. You don't actually need to do anything to get a copyright when you've created something. So just so everyone listening is clear from a legal perspective, you don't have to go out and put your stuff on Zora to get a copyright. In every country but the US, as far as I know, you don't actually need to do anything at all. Your copyright vests the minute you create your work. In the United States, your copyright also when it's created, but there's a registration regime that will give you some additional benefits in that copyright. But so, okay, sorry, I had to jump in. Sorry.
Thank you.
It's a way to prove that, you know, a timestamp, I think, is helpful. Sometimes you don't want someone to come back later and say they created something earlier. So a lot of people use some of these crypto things to say, look, this shows I copyrighted this on August 10th at 3 p.m.
I'm going to resist the urge to jump in again.
Lawyers. That's definitive, 100%. Keep going, Paul.
Do you have anything to add on this site?
I don't. I've never actually spent any time on it. I know that they have more of video and music, and some. It's interesting. I'm starting to see a lot of digital music people start to play around with NFTs. So it started with kind of this, from a collector's perspective. For me, it was kind of like the pop art folks, and then the NBA made a big splash with their thing that I mentioned earlier. And then now a lot of the musicians I follow are starting to do NFTs. So I think a lot of them use Zora for what they're doing.
Okay, Foundation is like the top of the minor league, or could be a low major league app or website. It is closed. It is curated. The only way to get in is to get an invitation, and usually invitations are given to artists that sell something, and then they can pass that along. It's a good opening way. This is the site that I like. Prices are medium to low, but the artwork generally is outstanding. You can see a lot of trends on this site, trends in digital style and color. But the site itself tends to have a bias that they like to promote people they know or artists that have a large following. They've also sold a lot of NFT images of famous memes, like the smiling girl in front of the burning house.
Classic. Yeah, I wrote this bottom part. The curated stuff is really good on Foundation, but then once you kind of start searching around, it's unusual from an e-commerce perspective, because you find these things, it's hard to tell what's for sale, how much it is, and then a lot of these things are these kind of like dormant auctions where they just sitting there and then it says bid and then you bid and then it starts an auction that has like a 24-hour clock or something like that. So it took me a while to kind of understand as a buyer how buying worked on these sites. Almost none of them have a buy it now. It's almost pure auction on Foundation, I found. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and Foundation also only lets you do a one of one. It doesn't let you do a series, but they're improving each month, and it's a clean site and it's very easy to navigate, and that's helpful.
Can I, because I think that I might have this question because I know I did have that question. When Paul was saying a one of one, NFTs can function just like editions of a print. And you can mint as many editions of the NFT as you want to. So, a one of one just means that there's only one of them, obviously, and then you can make multiple editions. And for instance, the NFT that I bought during doing my research was one of 100 or something like that. So it's just like selling a fine art print.
So before we move on from Foundation, I do want to point out there's a question in the chat of how do I get an invitation on Foundation? It seems like it might be an invite-only platform.
Yeah, it's invite only. You have to know someone that has sold something. There's sometimes people put on Twitter that they have extra invitations and they ask you to give them a follow and also post a sample of your work. And then at the end of the week, they'll randomly pick somebody that they like.
Interesting. Okay.
And Paul, that's where you've been selling all your stuff, right?
Yeah, that Foundation is the one I like. Super Rare is the next one, and this is, I think, is the most exciting. There's Super Rare, and there's also one called Maker's Place, and it has a lot of street artists, graffiti artists, a lot of people that are famous on the internet, and their prices are higher. They're geared towards collectors, and I think it's my favorite site.
Yeah, it's pretty pricey. It's been interesting to see. There's, if you really want to get advanced on this, there's a 3D world that uses crypto as kind of the underlying structure for it. And then a lot of people will buy their NFTs and hang them in a kind of a 3D world, and it's called Decentraland. So most of that stuff is for sale here. I don't participate in that, but it's kind of interesting to watch that it's becoming more and more popular, and a lot of people spend a fair amount of time in there. So that's been interesting. And there's a lot of events in the NFT community held in this kind of virtual world. It's kind of like you've probably seen, who was it, like Marshmallow and some of these artists do things in Fortnite. There's a growing kind of amount of that type of activity going on in the NFT crypto world. So Super Rare tends to be at the core of that, because they have this focus on augmented reality and virtual reality. And then I've seen some brands starting to post some things, like Porsche did some interesting, they went into kind of like some Porsche archive vault and took out some early hand sketches of 911s and things like that. So Porsche enthusiasts got very excited by that. Some of them are like 3D CAD drawing kind of things too. So some kind of a lot of really interesting kind of pushing of boundaries on Super Rare.
So on the point about Porsche, we had a question in the chat about specifically, do they post like limited edition cars or prototypes? Like, what are they posting specifically, if you know?
Yeah, so a lot of brands will say, here's let me see if I can find it. Paul, you go on and I'll actually find it here. That'll be the best way for me to
I know that Hot Wheels has also gotten into it, and they're producing 3D images of their cars that people can collect. Generally, artists set their own prices. I believe Nifty Gateway helps with that. Some of the sites are one way, and some of them give you a couple of options. You can do a buy it now price, or you can create an auction. And so that's how prices are set. But the top of the line, one of the early major sites is Nifty Gateway. This is where Beeple is, and a few others that have become internet sensations from selling on Nifty. These are where the serious collectors are. And the artists have thousands and thousands of followers. And so you have to submit to get into this site. And my understanding is they're getting 1,000 submissions a day, and they're picking the very best.
Yeah, fun fact. If anyone saw the movie The Social Network, there's the Winklevoss twins. Do you guys know this? They call them the Winklevi. And so they're really big in crypto. So they took their settlement with Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, and they put it all into crypto, which ended up being a really good bet. They own this company Gemini that does a lot of crypto trading. Nifty Gateway is a subsidiary of that. So a fun Winklevoss fact for you.
And Nifty they do drops every day, what they call drops. And so at a certain time, they'll announce that coming up, this artist will be selling stuff, but you have to sign in at the time of the drop to start bidding, and it goes quickly.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun as a collector because they'll do these timed drops. So it'll be like 5 minutes, and they'll mint as many NFTs in those 5 minutes as people buy. And then people do these interesting things where if you can kind of get 3 things from a drop, it'll unlock a 4th, and that will be inside of the NFT contract. And then a lot of the people on there, they also do what's called, I call it hybrid. So it's like a physical and a digital, but it's called I think they call it twinning. So this is an NFT. It's an animated GIF that I own. It's called a Chunky. It's Chunky Spider-Man. And so this is actually a display that came with one of the drops. If I was one of the first 200, so this you can. So this is 120 of 200, and this matches my NFT. And their two are paired together. So when if I were to sell the digital version, I would need to sell this. The buyer would be expecting this to come along with it. And then, so it's interesting that it ties a physicality kind of element to it as well. So that's Nifty does a lot of cool stuff. There was another artist, the most famous artist beyond Beeple is called Fewocious, Fewocious. And they've started doing some really cool stuff where they'll do, a digital, a physical painting and shoes with the same kind of thing on there. And then that was like one of the first things I bought. I kept hearing about this artist. So I bought something from them, and I got super lucky because I started getting offers. And when the offers got up to 80 to 100 times what I bought, I finally said, I probably am going to sell this. And then I actually sold too soon because then they just did a big Christie's exhibit and did like a $3 million across 5 NFTs with physical pairings at Christie's. So there's been some really interesting stars created in the NFT world that have really rocketed up in popularity. I have an answer to the Porsche question.
Great. Yeah, we'll start with that one. And then we are at the end of the slide, so we'll shift over to Q&A. I have some questions queued, but if you're watching and you have a question that hasn't been answered yet, there's actually a Q&A button, so you can put it there or you can put it in the chat and we'll extract it out.
Yeah, can you guys see my screen? Yep. Okay. So I'm on Super Rare, and it looks like Porsche is doing this. A lot of brands that start with this, they start with kind of a charity aspect. So Porsche, it says that they've partnered with Fanzone, which I think is some fan community within Porsche. And they're going to put together it's an original design sketch, and it's going to be for 2 models, the Turismo and 911. And you can kind of see this is the artwork that you're going to get. So it's a digital sketch, and you would be the owner of this Porsche artwork.
Cool.
Yeah, and to get there, I just went to super rare search, and then I searched for Porsche if anyone wants to find that on their own.
Very neat. So going to the questions, oh, there's a Kevin Durant NFT, right?
Yeah, this is an example. So this one, they call them moments. So what the NBA has done is taken famous basketball moments, and they kind of view them like collectible cards in a way. So a fan can buy this moment and own that little snapshot, if you will. And then these things are very highly tradable. So they usually do these drops. This one is there's 500 out there, and this one went out for like $100, and now it's the minimum being traded is 1,800, and you can see notable sale of the number one went for 20,000 essentially. So the NBA is a huge fan of this, because the NBA, if the NBA puts out a trading card of LeBron James for 15 cents and then eventually it sells for $1 million, the NBA doesn't make any money off of outside of that 15 cents. Because these are NFTs and they have that contract I talked about. Every time these trade up in value, the NBA makes more money. So corporations love these things, and I'm very interested to see if other sports do this. I think there's a lot coming, and then ultimately do the really big IP owners like Disney with I'm obviously a Star Wars fan, but they own the whole Marvel IP. Do they start to release the equivalent of fan trading cards through this platform? I think they inevitably will, because the NBA made something like $600 million off this so far, and it it's all pure margin for them. No, they didn't really give up anything per se.
Sure. So I'll ask some of the questions here from the chat. So you've mentioned a lot of dollar figures. I think at a high level, one of the questions is who decides on the pricing, and I think that varies from platform to platform a little bit, but it's often an auction style, right?
That's correct.
It depends. So, Nifty's interesting. So they do these drops. These are these curated new art is coming kind of situations. And then within there's different ways to buy. Sometimes they'll do a 24-hour auction. If it's a one of one, they'll do some kind of what the equivalent of limited prints. And then there'll typically be a timed frame. You can buy that. But then there's a marketplace. So, Elizabeth said she's got a piece for sale. So you can actually come in here and see what's for sale. And then over on the left are all the different artists.
Well, and when I put ours up for sale, we could just list an asking price, and then someone can make an offer. So there are different ways that you can buy and sell it. It doesn't have to be as an auction, but I think sometimes auction is a way to sort of build a certain amount of frenzy around it, maximize your price.
Right. So I'm going to couple two questions we've gotten, maybe three questions we've gotten together. But so one question is, can you review what the artist is giving and what the buyer is receiving as far as rights to the work? Wondering if there's a lot of fine print to understanding each of the websites and the transaction procedures. And then the related question that came into the chat is, does the artist lose their copyright when the NFT sells?
For the most part, the artist retains the copyright. That's another amazing benefit to the NFTs for the artist. The person can buy the digital image, which gives them the right to owning that digital image, but they can't print posters or t-shirts or create a TV show based on that image. It's exactly like buying a painting. You own that image, and the artist can also continue to use that image. They just won't be able to sell it as a digital property. But there can be cases where the artist does assign the copyright to the person buying it.
Do you have like a Cliff's Notes version of like 3 or 4 marketplaces where they definitely don't sell the copyright?
My understanding is none of them own the copyright or transfer the copyright.
Great, cool. So the next question is, can you NFT a published book? What about an audio book?
You couldn't take a Tom Clancy book and NFT it because you'd be violating Tom Clancy's or the publisher's copyright. So if you own the copyright to a book, I don't see any reason why you couldn't, take the digital version of that and create an NFT.
Like
bands have
edition, right?
I didn't hear you, Brandon. What you said?
I just said like a first print edition that you might buy in a rare bookstore, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Their bands have started selling NFTs of their albums, which would be similar.
So then the next question is, are there traditional artists doing NFTs, and is there a site more geared towards traditional artists? So maybe not digital art, but more traditional art.
I think they're all like that. Nifty or Foundation. You have illustrators, photographers, digital artists, 3D artists, animators. It's just a matter of what is the taste of the public right now.
And then related is the question, trying to understand the balance between new content versus old content. I guess this might be a good question for Paul or Elizabeth about, what do you find either buying or selling, or from the auction house perspective, from the consumer, like what are the consumers most interested in? Are they interested in new content or NFTs of old established content? Where's the market?
Elizabeth, do you want to take this one?
Well, I mean, sorry, I can't tell if I'm muted. Dog's barking. That's an interesting question, because from what I can tell from NFT marketplaces, that market is generally a pretty, I mean, you can look at what's on the screen right now. That does not relate to old content. On the other hand, I would say in the auction marketplace in general, things that wear well over time certainly do best. And so it will be interesting to watch as NFTs become a more established thing to sell, and digital art becomes a more established art form that people are more used to consuming. It will be interesting to see if the sort of what's the word I'm looking for? What normally sells well in physical art is also what sells well in digital art. But I think that right now, simply by virtue of the fact that it's a pretty, not necessarily narrow, but a specific buyer for NFT art right now, it tends to be a lot of pretty boundary pushing contemporary stuff.
Yeah, I would agree.
And for instance, the things that sold really well, the Beeple that sold for 69 million or whatever, it was, attention grabbing. And he did a lot of like naked Trump stuff and baby Trump stuff, and, very of the moment. So yeah. On the other hand, I think that sometimes when people see things, people who are more interested in more traditional art, when they see some of the things that pop up first on their screens when they're looking at NFTs, they kind of can't find a toehold in the digital art world that feels comfortable. But as you explore digital art, there's some stuff that, I think that was one of the things in our auction house as we all went around and talked about what's attractive and why would you want digital art, because we're all very versed in, oil paintings. There is a lot of digital art being made that appeals, I think, to a traditional art buyer as well. And there's some really like beautiful stuff out there. And as people start to consume more and more things on screens, it will make sense to be making that kind of art for people.
So we got another question in the chat. Can they print, and I think this means the buyer of the NFT, can they print that image for their home? And then there's an interesting anecdote about that from Twitter that I'll share, but I'll wait for the answer from the panel.
Yeah, they could. It would just, a lot of times it's the same as taking a screenshot of something the computer or right-clicking and downloading it, the quality is going to be better. But yeah, they could print it and create a poster or something, but they wouldn't be legally, they wouldn't be allowed to sell it.
So I've also seen that some sites, like on Nifty Gateway, it would not allow me to download the NFT that we bought. But well, it was a video for one thing. But other sites do allow for a download of a high resolution file, which is the thing, like if you screenshot something or just do a copy of it, you aren't necessarily going to get as high quality of a file if you're buying something that isn't animated or something, and you do want to download it. And so I know that different sites and possibly different contracts on Nifty Gateway that I'm just not aware of, you can download, but it just depends.
So the anecdote that I'll share is that there was an artist who put their artwork on an NFT marketplace, and I don't know which artist or which marketplace, but I could find out. And then later saw on social media someone had paid a third-party printer to print a very large, very high-quality print of the thing that they bought on the NFT marketplace, and then sort of commented on social media, "Hey, I didn't give you permission to do that." And the guy was like, "Well, I bought the NFT." And so it was a little bit of a public spat, which was sort of funny. But I think there's another wrinkle in that particular case where the guy paid a third party to do the printing, so in theory had violated the copyright a couple different times, right? By licensing it to a third party, and yeah, so it can be a little bit tricky to answer the question, can you print that at home once you've bought it?
There's a lot of stuff they're figuring it out as they go, because at, say, the comic book convention, comic book artists are allowed to do sketches of Superman or Batman or Wolverine, but then they tried putting them on as NFTs, and DC and Marvel cracked down on that, saying you don't have the right to sell these drawings.
Yeah, that's interesting. So we've got a question. What happens when an NFT is lost?
It's like the famous USB thing that someone got locked out of. If you lose the digital login to these things, they're gone. So be careful.
All right, that was a fun one. On the initial sale, what % are these marketplaces typically taking? Like, is it the marketplace getting the lion's share? Is it the artist getting the lion's share? I know you mentioned the resales, but on the initial sale.
I don't know, Paul. I would imagine in the physical world, it's usually kind of 10 to 15%. I would imagine it's a bit higher in the digital world. Do you know, Paul? Is it like 30%?
Yeah, well, in a gallery, it can be as high as 50% split. Here, it's 20 to 30% for the first sale, and then some sites take a small percentage for the second sale, and then after the third sale, the percentage, 10%, goes only to the artist. But most of them they take a cut from the first sale, and then after that, the artist continues to get 10%.
Cool. All right. So the next question, so there's one that I want to close on here, but I'll start. I think we're coming to the end of our time, so I'll hit this one, and then if anybody has any last minute stuff, get it in. But so when uploading your image, the pixel size is not that big. Do you send the buyer a larger file where it is housed, or how do you get them a larger image?
For the most part here, the image, most artists upload a high res version. There is no standard size, so you have to, the sites will list what the dimensions and the DPI are. Some sites allow the artist to add something for the buyer after the sale. So some artists will send an extremely high resolution file to go with the sale.
Okay. How does an artist get paid? Do you register with a bank account? Do you get paid in crypto, or do you have a choice between the two?
Scott, do you know on Nifty, I know on
Depends on the
Foundation,
marketplace. Some of the marketplaces, they're like pure crypto oriented, so you would get paid in Ethereum. Now, the nice thing about crypto is once you get used to kind of this conversion, it's kind of like the first time you go to Europe and you have to learn euros and you're kind of like, how does this work? And then you kind of get the hang of it, both mentally and then how you exchange in and out. It's a lot like that. In fact, it is like another currency. So once you get the hang of, moving things from dollars to Ethereum and then back again, you're actually pretty liquid. It's not like there's some lock on these things that makes it hard to move into US dollars. I think Nifty probably is one of the few that would do, I bet, dollars, because on the buyer side, they do dollars and Ethereum. So I bet on the artist side, they do both. I think most of the other ones would be, the underlying, most of them would be Ethereum.
I know that
the other, go ahead.
I know that selling the thing that we bought on Nifty, we're going to get paid in dollars if anybody buys it. I don't know if anybody's going to. But
yeah. Here's actually a related question. Where does crypto live once you get paid? So I think that's more of a how does cryptocurrency work question. And I don't know if anybody wants to take that at maybe a very high level answer so that we can move on to some closing thoughts.
Yeah, I'll give like a layman's answer. Your crypto lives in a wallet, and I keep my NFTs and my crypto kind of out in a cloud account because I do worry about losing a physical thing or forgetting a certain password. And most of these marketplaces, they do have, they have really good security, but they do have a way if you forget your password to do a password reset. Hardcore crypto people, they like to keep there's physical wallets you can buy, which is usually on a USB device or something like that. So hardcore crypto people, they love to kind of have their wallet be a hardware wallet. I personally am not really big on that because I would lose sleep thinking I was going to lose the thing. But, the hardcore crypto people, if someone bought Bitcoin, a lot of Bitcoin 5 or 10 years ago, they may have millions of dollars on these things. So there are a lot of people that try to attack and get crypto underlying. For that reason, I try not to, I keep almost everything in US dollars and in more of a secure kind of a thing.
So I think, yeah, so we've got some clarification on the question. So if you have crypto, does that and you get it from the site that you are selling it from, will it go into like your Coinbase wallet, or will it go into whatever sites that you're selling it on's wallet? I guess Elizabeth, you just did this, maybe but...
Yeah, it can be either. So you can keep your NFTs on the site, like it creates sort of like a site-based crypto wallet for you when you buy it, when you buy an NFT, and then you can also move it to your own crypto wallet if you want to. So it can do either.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm interested in hearing from everybody on the panel, kind of, from an artist perspective, a collector's perspective, and a marketplace perspective. Where do you see the art market going as a result of, the advent of NFTs?
As an artist, I think it's almost unlimited potential now. Not only collectors worldwide collecting your stuff, but I see in the future walls becoming digital or LED displays. So you could display your NFT on your wall and it could change with your mood or event, or you could change it out for what each season. Also with virtual reality, people are going to begin having VR galleries, so you could walk through somebody's, like Scott's collection, and just like you were being in a museum.
That's one thing I was going to add to that, is just that I think for those of us who have been so attached to the physical world, certainly an auction house where we sell a lot of paintings and antiques and jewelry and cars, very physical assets, it can be hard to wrap your head around how vast the potential for digital experiences. And I was looking on Nifty Gateway yesterday, and there was a pair of shoes, and we could not for the life of us figure out whether or not you were actually buying a pair of shoes or if you were buying digital shoes. And we finally figured out, oh, these are shoes that you wear in a VR environment. So it's like yes, you get actual shoes, but not to put on your actual body, to put on your digital body. So I think that, but again, there are generations of people who are being raised right now who are going to be so adept at this. And I think, like Paul said, the sky's the limit. It's interesting from an auction point of view. Auctions are such a pure marketplace in a way, and that things are sold literally for what the market will support in that moment. And so it's interesting to see that something like NFTs, which so many of us have had such a hard time kind of understanding where the value is, that there was so quickly a value put on something that was hard to even for most of us to even wrap our heads around. And the marketplace told us this has value, whether we could understand it or not. And so just from like sort of like a pure marketplace point of view, there's clearly value there. And I think as there's been this initial frenzy with the Beeple thing selling for 69 million, and I think probably the flush of that initial excitement will wear off, and it will become more like sort of any other marketplace where you're going to have to fight a little bit for your slice of it. But that doesn't mean it's going away. Just because you aren't going to sell something for 69 million tomorrow doesn't mean that it's not saleable.
Yeah, as an entrepreneur, one of the reasons I kind of urged Paul to look at it is if you look at the physical art market, the data I've seen says in the US it's about 50 billion a year. NFTs are already at a 5 billion run rate and more than doubling. So you can see a day, and I've seen this in the world. I come from e-commerce where early days of retail, everyone laughed and said no one will buy a couch online and maybe a book, and that's it. And then you see these kind of waves of adoption, and now we order our groceries and are upset when it doesn't show up in 30 minutes. So I think a big landmark will be, when do we get to 50% digital, 50% physical? And I think that'll happen faster than you probably would think. If we're going to do 5 billion in NFTs this year, 10 to 15 the next, 30 to 40, and then I think that's 2025. You could see those lines cross. So if I was an artist, it's something to keep an eye on. Maybe it's not for you. And what we don't know is how much of that 5 billion in NFTs is incremental. How much was it someone not buying a physical thing and choosing digital, or how was it 100% new people to the world of art?
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting to find out the cannibalization rate, right? So just as a parting thought, I think a lot of the people in the audience are artists, and I think it'd be good to answer the last question. So I saved this from the chat, but it's just, how would you recommend an artist get started with NFTs?
I would say look at each website, find a website that represents the style and the art that you do, and then just start applying to them. Like the Super Rare and Maker's Place and Nifty, you have to apply. And like as I said before, they're getting thousands of people a day. Build your social media, make your presence known on the internet, get their attention. But just start making stuff and start building your own audience and collectors.
Great advice.
Yeah, another way to get started is if I'm imagining most of the folks are physical artists. Look at maybe just doing this pairing. This is how a lot of the comic book artists are doing it, where they'll at least have a tracking NFT token to a physical piece of art, so that if someone is interested in that combination, it's something that they offer. That may be a pretty easy way for people to get started. Elizabeth, I don't know if have you guys thought of helping artists with that at the gallery level?
We have thought about it. It's interesting to think about it from an auction house perspective. One of the things that appeals to us as an auction house about it is that it takes us directly to the artist rather than to the secondary market, which is where we generally operate. It puts us kind of firsthand connected to the artist, and we also like the idea that the artist can continue to benefit from the sale of their work rather than usually everything we sell, none of it goes back to the artist. There was one other thing one thing I think is interesting too, that as this market moves forward, it will be interesting to see how I think it will probably be important to identify your consumer base and like who your customers are and who's interested in your art. And because these marketplaces are such kind of a wide open thing right now, I'm sure it could feel like an artist putting art on there a little bit like putting a needle into a haystack. So I think it will be interesting to see how artists and collectors sort of curate communities in these spaces, and artists work on gaining followings, and if there's some sort of thing like getting how it will work for NFTs in the way that it helps an artist to have gallery representation or museum exhibitions, and how those things sort of lend legitimacy to the artwork, and how that will work in the NFT space in order to distinguish artists from the sort of collective whole.
Yeah, so I just as a reminder, or maybe as the first time you're hearing it, if you're listening, and you haven't come to one of the Triangle Artworks panels before, but we will send out, or Beth will send out, I shouldn't say we, I'm not going to do it. Beth will send out a handout sort of with some bullet points to like things to remember from today's conversation. So hopefully if you registered with an email address, I think everybody did, but that's where it will go, and hopefully that'll have some useful information that answers some questions if you have any lingering questions. I know Scott put his social media contact in the chat at the beginning. You can find me at odinlaw.com, and then just click through find the attorneys. I'm there. You can email or message me. Paul, I don't know if you want to share any contact details. Elizabeth, same thing.
Sure. On Foundation, which is foundation.app /Friedrich, FRIEDRICH. And on Twitter, I am allpaul, at allpaul.
We're just Leland Little Auctions pretty much everywhere. I'm Elizabeth at lelandlittleauctions.com if you want to, or excuse me, just lelandlittle.com. But yeah, all our social media is Leland Little Auctions.
And we'll try to include at least some contact information for each person in that handout too. But thank you all for coming. I think I certainly learned some things. Hopefully everybody else did too. And Beth, I don't know if there's anything else we need to say from Triangle Artworks. Are we good?
No, thank you. Thank all of you for participating. It was fascinating. I know so much more, and I feel a lot more comfortable with it than I did, and I thought I understood them. So, thank you.